Part of the theme, particularly infused into this year's exponential medicine, is the idea of patients included, which I borrowed from our faculty member, Lucien Engeland, from the Netherlands, who will be speaking later today. The idea that patients need to really be integrated into the cutting edge and the future of health and medicine. And our next faculty member came to our very first Future Medicine program a couple of years ago. I met him at Lucien's program in Europe previously, ePatient Dave, who sort of exemplifies the idea of the engaged, empowered patient who really wants to own and understand his healthcare plan and own his own data. He came up with the phrase, give me my damn data, as well. And just last month, it was announced from the Mayo Clinic that he will be the first patient as a visiting faculty on the Mayo hospital system. So with that, really pleased to have ePatient Dave, a major figure in instigating the future of medicine, come join us this afternoon.
Don't need that?
Oh, you don't need that, okay.
Got some interesting things going on in the world. I've been fascinated with the things I've been hearing here, and I'm going to talk specifically about research, clinical trials. When I was almost dead from stage 4 kidney cancer 7 years ago, I participated in a clinical trial of a new protocol. But today you will hear a somewhat related story that has never been told before, and I hope you'll enjoy it. My ePatient speaking career really took off 3 years ago. That's 5 years ago. Nope, that was 2011, wasn't it? No good at math these days. Anyway, I gave a TEDx talk in a town in the Netherlands called Maastricht, and as a quick recap, I'm sure some of you have seen the talk, but most have not. These are a few slides from it. First, I said, patient is not a third-person word. It does not work to say, we're all patients someday. When it hits your breakfast table and it's you or somebody you love that's involved, everything changes. So get the idea, we're all patients someday out of your mind. I showed Tom Ferguson, the founder of the ePatient movement, who said e-patients are equipped, engaged, empowered, enabled. He died in 2006, but he coined this term in the 1990s. That's a visionary. One thing I like about this conference, when I came here when it was at NASA Ames 3 years ago, just after that TEDx, almost everything I saw on the stage has come true, and that's pretty amazing. Can't say that about many conferences. I showed that I had all these tumors all through my head. I had a kidney cancer tumor growing out of my tongue, and I ended with a chant, let patients help. This is not about overthrowing physicians. It's about recognizing that patients can be value-creating contributors. Now, I'm going to take that one step further, because beyond letting us help, there is autonomy. Angela Coulter in the UK published a book in 2002, The Autonomous Patient. And I'm going to take a little tour here of what's happening newly, because some of the talks I've heard here seem to be on track with this, and some seem to be dangerously behind the curve. Here's a question for you. We all know lots of people with lots of training have opinions, but who gets to say what's in the patient's best interest? And again, until you find out that you're dying or somebody you care about is dying, it may be hard to comprehend this. Well, I became a grandparent 1.5 years ago, and it put a whole new light on the idea of paternalistic care. Now, I have stopped using the term paternalism because everybody talks like paternalism is a bad thing, but I'm keenly aware that paternalistic caring is appropriate up to a point. This baby has no idea what they need medically, so somebody takes care of them. But there comes a point, see, this is my granddaughter, thank you, yes, she is astoundingly gorgeous. I mean, humanity has reached its potential. Well, you know, there's something weird, because for years, my college friend said, oh man, grandchildren are great, just wait. And I was like, yeah. Well, when I first held that child in my arms in the hospital, I had this instant knowing that hit me. It's like, this is the one. I'm not kidding. Someday, I'm sure we'll find some region at the base of the brain that says we're wired to think that. Anyway, when she goes for a ride in the car, she's put in a rear-facing car seat, in the back seat, and she's taken where she needs to go. She has no capacity for comprehending those issues, that they even exist. But there will come a time where she has an opinion about where she wants to go. She'll be asked, you want to go to the beach today or a movie or what? And there will come a time eventually where she's driving. And it is our work to understand at what point is more autonomy appropriate. Now, the Institute of Medicine published a book, 380-page report 2 years ago. If you haven't seen it, you better at least get the executive summary of it because it's continuing to unfold. Best care at lower cost, and in the executive summary is this table of 4 pillars of what they say is the learning healthcare system that we need. And number 2 on the list was patient-clinician partnerships. And they explicitly said engaged, empowered patients. They almost said e-patients. I wrote an email to the president of the IOM and said, couldn't you have just said e-patient? It would make my work a lot easier. Well, anyway, look at the exact wording they used. Anchored on patient needs and perspectives. Anchored. Not like I'm going to do what I'm doing and then we'll invite some patients in for cookies, the way many hospitals do, but anchored on, that means you start there, and it means that when the tide and the currents get rough, you stay anchored to it. Well, a more recent example is in September, I spoke at ESMO, which is the European Cancer Conference, and my talk was titled Meaningful Patient Involvement in Clinical Trial Endpoints. Now, for some of you, that may sound like an absurd idea. The paternalistic thing comes back. No, 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 honey, you don't understand. I'll decide that for you. Well, there's a woman who spoke in my session named Bettina Rill. She's an MD, PhD. Her husband died of metastatic melanoma, and she has this model of the, I'm using this slide with permission, of the stages of a clinical trial, and she points out that patient involvement generally increases as you get farther down the road, which she points out in the bottom stripe, it basically amounts to doing things right. Well, she proposes that there's more impact on patients at the early stages. And yes, we are talking about patients having a voice in what gets studied. All right? And she says this is doing the right thing. In June, the BMJ, formerly known as the British Medical Journal, published an editorial on their own patient journey. Most people I talked to are completely unaware of this. They said, first of all, the editors have decided to take on a patient advisory panel, people who are not medically trained to advise the editors, and they are really doing this. We have a really active listserv. Paul Wicks from Patients Like Me is there. Lucian Englund, who Daniel just mentioned, is there. I'm on it. They're now having patients peer reviewing research papers about their articles, about their disease, rather. Now, they have to be trained to do this, the same as PCORI is training people to participate in this, but they are having patients without medical training, except their own experience, involved. And on the form where you go to upload an article now, the submitter is asked how to document how they involved patients in defining the question. This is the BMJ. So this is not some hippie, wacky, kumbaya movement. Patients are wonderful. Well, and the outcome measures even. How did you involve patients in defining the outcome measures, the endpoints? Well, at this conference in Madrid, ESMO, this woman, Anastasia Negruk from Athens, took a modified version of Dr. Rill's slide, and even going back as far as identifying what's the unmet need. Now, for some diseases, Parkinson's disease is one of them, there's a lot of controversy because a lot of patients in the activated patient communities don't agree with what the researchers are working on. Well, on September 29th, there was a really interesting article about this in the Wall Street Journal, and the headline writer blew it. Here, the situation was this. What the article talked about was patients and researchers can bring different perspectives, right? That sounds like the IOM, right? But patient input convinced them to ask additional questions. Patients have helped design a trial at the University of Wisconsin. One researcher says, perhaps the question we're asking in testing new treatments are not the questions that are important to patients. This new approach represents a dramatic shift. Pharma and clinicians hope the outreach will boost the number of patients who participate in trials. Well, I looked at the metadata behind that Wall Street Journal page, and what they had actually written for the teaser copy was, in a dramatic shift, patients are helping researchers design trials. Look what they actually ran in the headline. Patients play researcher. This kind of reminds me of the people in Silicon Valley who say that women just ought to not ask for so much because they're kind of like children asking for candy and things like that. Look at what it says on the flip chart there. What they were actually saying is that they wanted engagement, empowerment, and owning their own case. See, to them, it's their health. It's not playing researcher. Well, here's where the presentation takes a little left turn, folks, because it's a little-known fact. There's something that can be told now for the first time, and I'm going to lead you on a little inquiry about what's going on here. What is the subject? What do our last three presidents have in common? Not a whole lot politically, but maybe here's another hint. Here's a map that had to be updated last week after Election Day. It is the progress of marijuana legalization across the United States. Now, I am a graduate of the MIT class of 1972 by the skin of my teeth, but I actually did graduate. And we've heard an awful lot about the West Coast universities here. I just want to say we got some brains over there, too. Are there any other fellow alumni in the room? Yeah, so who can tell me what the name, classic MIT, the name of this building is? Well, actually, good try, Lobby 10. This is 77 Mass Ave. So this is Building 7 in classic MIT, honor somebody. No, it's got a number on it. Well, in my TEDx talk, I mentioned that in the summer of 1969, humanity landed on the moon for the first time, and that was the first photo that was ever taken of the Earth from another surface. I mentioned that 3 weeks later, Woodstock happened, and this was one heck of a time to be a 19-year-old, let me tell you, especially in Boston. And I showed, for historical authenticity only, this photo of myself in that summer. And over the years, a number of people have said, dude, what's that thing in your mouth? Well, now it can be told, because that was a glass tube. You know who you are. I have done service in the cause. You're about to find out about it. This story has never been told. That was a glass tube that was fitted into a 2-hole rubber stopper in an Erlenmeyer flask. I've happily found this diagram at the University of Queensland, and yes, that is a thistle tube next to it. Of course, this was not sulfuric acid up there at the thistle tube, it was weed. As a result of which, the solution at the bottom was not that sodium sulfite, it was bong water, which accounts for Exhibit A. I'm just joining our last three presidents. So one fine day in the spring of my senior year, I was strolling through the Building 7 lobby. And as those of you who've been there will know, you walk through this, and over on the left there's a little alcove where there's a bulletin board. And the bulletin board was there, and I saw a guy putting up a sign just as he put it up, subjects needed. Now, I have made plenty of pocket money being paid $2 an hour to be a subject in a psych experiment. They put a rubber mouthpiece in your mouth and they flash things at you. This one, when I looked closer, said $6 an hour. And then it said, experienced marijuana smokers only. Oh my goodness, when need and purpose align, Ben. See, we want to get healthcare to the point where it's that patient-centered, right? Well, and the sign said, call Dr. G's office at Boston City Hospital, now Boston Medical Center. In those days, phone numbers were only 7 digits long, easy to remember. And off to the side of this was a bank of payphones, and I dropped a dime immediately. And I found out when I got there that I was the first subject in the federal government's pot smoking experiments. Now it can be told. Well, so I go down there at 8 a.m., which is an unusual hour for the hippie me of those days, and they had one of these doors with a frosted glass window, and I kid you not, they had taped a printed sign on the door that said, "The Joint Project." I have tried and tried to see if anybody's still around who was actually part of that, but it's true. Now we switch to scientist hat, okay? Imagine the challenges of the experimental design. Number one, controlling the dosage per kilogram. Well, I knew they were going to ask, so when I filled out the form for my weight, I divided by 2.2 and said 81 kilograms. The nurse looked at me like I was a smartass. Percent of lung capacity filled. How do you control that? Because if somebody gets the same dose in a difference, then don't let any smoke escape unconsumed, and don't let any spill. You don't want the subject to go coughing, and on and on and on. So, first challenge, how much is one lung full? Well, some of you may know, you measure that with a lung capacity cylinder. So, and what you do is you breathe into the tube and you find out how big that is. Next challenge, preventing spillage. This is more of a challenge. Well, this is called a pulmonary function test machine. In those days, they made a plywood and plexiglass phone booth for me to sit in. And just say, to be a hippie and looking out the plexiglass windows at the doctors in their white coats with clipboards is a very unusual experience. Well, and it turns out now, if you imagine with the progress of legalization, there may be, for upscale people, a variety of really interesting apparati developed. We may see upscale restaurants someday where you have the equivalent of a wine steward who clamps your nose while you sit in their machine. Or in this case, if you're mixing two particular components, you may have this Jetson-looking thing. And in the process of Googling for this talk, I also found this. Now, I don't even want to know what's going on here. But now what do we do? Well, you got to get the smoke in there. So they did a pipe. They took a little pipe and drilled a hole into the side of the thing, and you draw up the smoke, and then back down, it gets pumped into your lungs. Well, now that therefore got connected to the phone booth thing, which made that's one heck of a bong. What can I say? Really odd apparatus. So the doctor, I'm sitting in there with bare-chested with the EKG leads, and the doctor gets out the Bic lighter, and Houston, we have a problem. The problem was that they used a hash pipe bowl, and the substance was extremely wet and rich and thick buds from the government's dope farm at the University of Mississippi, and it clogged. Well, they fiddled and fiddled and fiddled and fiddled, and then I realized, holy crap, they don't know what they're doing. I do, so I offered an expert consult. And in order to make this a fulfilling experience for you, I spent about a half an hour at Home Depot last Friday, and it was an interesting experience. I couldn't find what I needed, so I had to explain to the guy what I was there for. And his face lit up. The guy in the orange apron, he said, "Well, you're taking me back about 30 years, but I'll see what I can do for you." And indeed, we came up with pieces that matched the actual apparatus, right? Just screw together an elbow piece and so on. And I said, well, this thing's too big. For the camera folks, I'm supposed to hold still. Maybe you'll want to back off a little bit. So this thing is too tight. So I said, do you have any more? And they took me over to their laboratory drawers, hundreds of drawers of things. And I said, oh yeah, so here we go. And found a bigger one, much more appropriate size. And they said, the doctors in the white coats and clipboards said, but that's too big, the stuff will fall down. I said, no. I got out my wallet and took out my spare screen that I carried with me everywhere. put that in here, said, now this will work. And the doctors are noting the redesign of the apparatus. So then we return to the apparatus, torch it in, and then let it cool. It's a bong. It's an air bong, but it's a bong. And then I inhale. And what happened next, I can only liken to this famous scene from the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers comics. That was some good stuff, I'll tell you. So I'm thinking, well, now what do I do? Because we did our various tests and things that we had to do during the day, but then I had to go back out there. Is it really safe to walk out of Boston City Hospital stoned? I don't know, but I'd be the first person to do that, right? Well, fortunately, they had it covered, and I know I'm going to run a couple minutes long, but not much. They had it covered. For that one day, I got to carry with me a little yellow card signed by Richard Nixon's Attorney General, John Mitchell, authorizing me to be stoned. And yes, I did ask if I could keep it, and they said no. So, to return to the topic, my contributions to the experiment, I knew what was important in the process. I had practical expertise on how to deal with things that came up. You find these things all the time in patient communities and not in the literature. All right? This doesn't contradict what patients know, doesn't contradict what physicians or researchers know. It adds to it. And I had domain expertise for the diameter of the orifice that was needed, an additional component. This is my contribution to the progress of legislation in the United States of America. And before I conclude, I just want to point out something that happened 1 week ago today, furthering this. The FDA announced activities for patient participation in medical product discussions. Specifically, they said, to obtain the views of patients during the medical product development process. The FDA is announcing this. And ways to consider patients' perspectives during regulatory discussions. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Institute of Medicine on the hoof at the FDA. As others have said here in the last couple of days, William Gibson, the future is here. It's just not easily distributed. I thank you for your attention, and please let patients help in the design of research. Thank you.